Hello everyone, I'm the Girly Organist, and today I am joined in an interview by, I'm totally fangirling at this moment, the organist Felix Hell. Hi Felix. So we connected on Instagram when I saw Felix in another interview actually with a colleague, and he was discussing what organists of the future should consider when thinking about a career in the organ. So following on from that, in some ways, I thought, well, this would be an interesting time to talk about what are the contemporary issues in the organ world, and just maybe bring a little bit of a different take on some of those. So hello Felix, thank you for
Hi, Rebecca.
Really appreciate that. So let's start. We put some questions together. Why don't we go with the question, social media and its impact on practice? So how has social media impacted your practice?
I'm not sure how it has impacted me personally, but dabbling around on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, you see more information than ever. Everybody is trying to be helpful. Everybody's trying to share their experience, share their advice. And I think what we see is that everybody has a different plan. Everything works different for everyone. And I think to be able to weed through all of that and to find what's helpful to oneself is to remind oneself what practicing really is and what you're trying to achieve while you're practicing. And I remember my piano teacher, when I first began playing the piano and then later the organ, he said to me that practicing and learning music, in essence, is a process of memorization. We may not experience it as such, because we're using music, especially in the early stages of learning a piece. But I think remembering that we're memorizing music as we are learning music, I think already gives us a good indicator in terms of what we should or shouldn't do. So when I practice, I find that the quality far outweighs the quantity of practice. And this goes into as much detail as saying every time I play literally anything, I want to make every effort to do it without any mistakes, so that whatever rendition I'm producing at that very moment is impeccable. Now, of course, we cannot play perfectly from the very beginning, but what it is essentially telling us is we must slow down the practice process. So if you cannot play something correctly, it's 95% of the time it's because you're doing it too fast. And we want to do things quickly. We want to learn fast. That's understandable. Everybody's that way. I'm that way. I guarantee it. But in order to learn more quickly, we have to slow things down. And I think once that has happened and we're able to play correctly, I think then we can look into all kinds of other strategies and making things happen. But in my opinion, whenever I work with my students, slowing down is most times the key.
Yeah. So how about, the idea, I suppose, mental health awareness, at least, is definitely on the rise, and people are suffering from, anxiety and things like that. So you say that, maybe it's more from your students' perspective, that actually, we can take a video practicing maybe like 5 bars that we know we can play really well, and then that's what we post on social media. So because obviously we all want to show the absolute best version of ourselves, but then does that maybe impact, what's the impact of that, sort of, because in some ways it's a false success, because actually if you had to play 15 bars and the 5 bars either side, they were rubbish, edit that out, so people kind of go, oh, you're amazing, that's brilliant, but actually it's kind of hiding the reality and perhaps showing something that's not necessarily true. You know, it's not concert ready in practice. So how do you know, is that something that comes up on your feed a lot? I know that comes up on my feed, and it can be quite annoying sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, if you ask me, I think the actual process of practicing and posting that practice in social media has no benefit. I think when you're practicing and you're getting down and dirty, you have to be entirely undistracted. You have to be entirely inside your own mind. You have to be on your own. If then you want to go ahead and share your results, I think that's perfectly fine. I think what I haven't seen, and that may be an interesting thing for anyone to do, I think it's actually an idea that I'm just now considering, now that I think about it. It would be an interesting process to actually film an entire practice session, and not just the final result when everything is going really well, but to show musicians or show students who may think, oh, it just happens that way and that's how he or she practices, but to actually have a live stream of 2, 3, 4 hours where things are being worked on. I think that's a much more realistic approach. And I think that is something that can be actually helpful and enlightening to other musicians to see, hey, you know what, regardless of what level you're on, you still have to work on it, you know, with all the dirtiness that goes with it. And then finally, you can demonstrate, hopefully, a shiny product and say, this is the result of my work.
No, I always find it really sort of fascinating. And perhaps, you know, maybe part of the reason in the organ world, you know, because there's like 100 days of practice, but there aren't very many organists that take on those challenges. And I feel maybe, you know, orchestral musicians, it's, you know, there's lots of them doing sort of real-time practice, but with the organ, it seems not to have taken on a life of itself in the same way. And perhaps, you know, is it people want to keep some more mystery about the organ world? You know, they want to keep the facade happy. I don't know. Do you think that's a feeling amongst the community, or whether it's is different? But you know,
I don't know.
Separate almost.
I have seen the challenge on Instagram, and I think it's a really cool challenge. But it seems to me that the 100 days of practice challenge, I think Hilary Hahn started it, and I think it's fantastic. I think the point of it is more to hold oneself accountable, to be consequent in working on your craft daily for 100 days straight, and to have a community that will hold you accountable. So I haven't seen, maybe there are some musicians who do that, but I haven't seen actually anyone practicing live. I think it's mostly of an accountability process to remind oneself, hey, I've got a community that stands behind me, and I wasn't going to do anything today, and we've all been there, but because I'm part of the challenge, I will get myself to at least try to do something. So to me, that's how I understood that challenge. And I think if it is used that way, I think it can be very beneficial.
The more people playing the organ more regularly is always a good thing. So that kind of brings us on to our next question, which is finding an organ to play. So in the days of, I know definitely here in the UK, church closures is, you know, on the rise. The elders, you know, are always saying we had to keep this instrument because the church had closed, and, you know, they're having to drive to all sorts of places and take these, you know, historic instruments out. How do organists find organs to play? You know, not everyone necessarily has space. I know lots of homes in the UK are quite small, or the cost of purchasing even an electronic organ, you know, it's not the same as a violin, for example. Amazon for £30. Okay, it won't sound very nice, but it'll do the job. You know, an organ, even a really inexpensive one, is thousands. So where do people practice? You know, you hear on the forums people talking about oh, I want to practice at this church, but they want to charge me £5 per hour. And you kind of go, well, that's not a sustainable option. So, you know, what are people to do? I don't know.
That is an excellent and very relevant question. And I want to answer that from two angles. The first one is from the angle of the seeker of a practice instrument. And I remember when I was a kid and I had just started playing the organ and I needed places to practice, I remember how crucial it was for me to network from one village to the next and to get to know the people. And there is one young student that I will begin working with very soon in the United States, once he has reached a certain level at the piano. And because we know that he's going to need practice instruments access to, I explained to his parents that now is the time to start networking. And you cannot be choosy, you cannot be picky, but it really comes down to making a lot of new friendships. And it is really as simple as picking up the phone, introducing yourself, or showing up at the church and explaining that you are an aspiring organist and you need an instrument to work on, and to not just try, oh, I would like to practice in that church because it's across the street, but to really play the numbers game, contact as many places as you possibly can, become friends with all of them. You realize that you may not be able as a total beginner to give anything in return in terms of your services. And in some cases, you may need to rent a space, but I would, as an organ student, avoid having to do that because I think there are better solutions. But this brings me to my second angle. I think we as organists, if we have a resource available, a church and a space and an instrument, I think we need to be ready to open our doors to young organists who are interested in learning our craft. We are in many ways fighting an uphill battle in promoting our instruments and finding young people who are interested in the instrument, who are interested in choosing this as a side career or even as a main career. And I think we need to be ready to receive anyone with open hearts and open doors and have a system in place and be able to instantly react and say, either, yes, come practice. I can offer you 2 hours on Wednesday after 10 p.m. or something like that, and Saturday mornings from 8 to 10. I think that's already a great place to start, and to connect with our colleagues and say, and remind them of the importance of opening our doors and making our instruments accessible. It's a really important question. Yeah, and we need to be aware of it. As students, we need to be proactive. And as mentors, I think we need to be ready to open our doors. And we need to include the clergy and anybody else who is involved in making decisions and educate them in the importance of being open to educate. Yeah. And I think we need to assume that role.
I think, like you said, there's those two aspects. You know, as an organist, you can be sat and, you know, you've got your access to your organ, you've got the keys, etc. But if somebody did come up to you after service and say, oh, my child's having organ lessons, could they come and practice? You know, is that infrastructure in place? Has it been through the relevant committees? Has it been through the clergy? You know, all of those are sort of preparation things that can be done. You know, don't wait until there is an organist standing there asking you the question. Have something in principle, have the conversation. I think that's really important. And then also, you know, I think definitely the one of the churches I play for, I'm all about that personal approach. So, you know, there's nothing worse for me than someone sending me an email saying, I'm amazing, give me a key, let me practice. You know, I kind of think churches are open places, services are regular, show up and come and say hello, because you're always going to get a far more favourable response because there's a little bit of effort than if it's just a kind of, I should be allowed because I live in this village. And like you said, it is a small community, and sometimes people just want to go across the road because it's the most convenient, but actually they don't want to necessarily put any effort into creating those new friendships, as you say. But it goes much further, especially when it comes to recitals, and and work ultimately. If people think, oh well, okay, yeah, I don't mind giving them a helping hand because they're really nice and they've got a good attitude. And so it's both sides, like you said.
Yeah, so many aspects of our work comes down to building relationships and building friendships and being there for each other to support each other. It's such a small world. I'm reminded of that constantly, and we simply cannot afford to think only about ourselves. We have to work together, and that comes from both opening our own doors and also when we approach others, that we take nothing for granted. It's easy to work together. It takes a bit of tact, of course, but I think it goes a long way.
Okay, so our next question. In the days where, people can record themselves for relatively lack of expense, they can release music, they can advertise music, they can publicize it. Let's take Bandcamp as an example. Bandcamp versus the CD. Obviously there's a generational thing perhaps where there's a certain generation of people still buying CDs of organ music in particular, because that's been the standard accessibility point. But actually, is there space on other platforms like Bandcamp? And should people that are maybe just producing CDs also be producing things to a new audience? Are we sort of limiting the audience by still only producing CDs and not actually going to where you're going to find the next generation of organists that are going to play this record, etc. So I don't know, what do you think? It's a big question, isn't it?
So say what?
It's a big question.
It's a big question, and I think at the core of it, we have to ask ourselves, why do we want to record CDs? What is the purpose of doing it? Because if you're early in your career and you're looking to present something to someone to advance your own opportunities, then I think whatever you can do to present will be helpful. Yeah. So that means
so the CD could be beneficial because you can physically give that to someone that maybe is part of a label, etc., who isn't necessarily, there's lots of labels that record specifically church and organ music who don't really have a digital online.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, the way I look at CD recordings, it really is in some form kind of like a snapshot of my work at that time in my career. If it's important for me to capture what I believe is really good about my work, and I don't have a label that wants to work with me, then it's not going to hold me back in publishing my music and sharing what I think is really good. There's not going to be anything that will stand in the way of doing that. So I think that we as musicians should not limit ourselves to saying, well, unless it's published by a professional label, I'm not going to do it. if you have something that you feel good about, if you have music that you feel strongly about, that says something, and that you say, wow, I think I'm creating something right now that has meaning, and I want to capture that. There are ways of doing that, whether you do it independently or whether you do it through a label. I think that's why I'm asking, what is the reason for recording? Some artists, some colleagues of mine that I've seen, they say, oh, I won't publish the CD unless it's with that and that and that label, because they have a certain status. And to me, it's really important to be able to advance my career in that way. And we have to ask ourselves, again, what is the purpose of that project, of that CD? So I find that labels, perhaps in the time of the internet and social media, are becoming not as relevant as they used to be. They can still do a lot of things in terms of bringing your music out internationally and bringing it to different distributors. That can be very helpful. And you might be able to generate some income through that. But even with the bigger labels, I think generating income for artists is, in most cases, from my experience, not the priority. The priority is to capture a moment in that artist's career. And if you can do that independently, I would highly encourage you to do that.
And I think as well for, organists just starting out, I know I haven't played the organ for very long, but I have been in music for quite a while, and as a pianist. So I'm new to the organ work, but not new to music and recording and how that side of it works. And I just, perhaps people should still watch out for labels saying, oh yes, but you need to buy 250 CDs. That's not a thing. You better release it online. Or perhaps they go, oh yes, well, we really want to record you. We think you've got a great sound, but it's going to cost you. That's not the process, or shouldn't be the process. And really question who are you making the money? If it's costing you thousands of pounds to record personally, then maybe something's not right. And I think maybe that message hasn't quite got out into the organ world in the same way that there's a lot more awareness of it maybe in popular music, etc. So people watch out for, if there's legitimate labels but they're saying that you have to underwrite the cost of X amount of CDs, well, really then they're not taking you on and signing you, are they? Because you're paying for the privilege of it.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I think what you're referring to are essentially independent labels that will produce works for you. And from my perspective, I've worked with independent labels, and again, you have to ask yourself, what are you trying to gain out of it? Are you trying to generate a source of income for yourself, or are you trying to use that CD as a means of advancing your career in another way, or is it really a memoir for yourself? So if somebody says, hey, I'll produce your CD, but you'll have to buy 250 units at wholesale price, if I think about, well, what can I do with those 250 units? Here are some concert presenters that I can reach out to, and I send them my CD and say, hey, this is my most recent work. And it's not, from your CD burner at home, but it's been professionally produced with good design and a jewel case and things like that. It can have value, and it can even financially give you a return on your investment. But again, you have to ask yourself, why do I want to do it? What's the purpose? What am I looking to gain in return?
Okay, so standard repertoire. There has recently been quite an influx of new organ music being published, solo organ music being published over the last few years. I'll say I'm part of the of that. I published my organ sonata this year. Where does that leave standard repertoire? obviously, you know, there's value in learning the standard repertoire for technique, for history, for understanding the instrument, for understanding era and what came before. You know, you're not going to say, oh, I'm never going to play Bach, because that would just be crazy. But where does all of this new organ solo music, where does that leave standard repertoire? Obviously, there's a lot of music by female composers or, you know, non-binary composers coming out. And obviously, you know, if you have a program that includes 2 pieces of new music, that excludes 2 pieces of standard repertoire. And, you know, sometimes people don't necessarily realize that that exchange is going on. So what does that mean for the standard organ repertoire, and how has it impacted yourself?
I don't think it really, new music written for the organ, I don't think really changes anything about the existing repertoire for the organ, at least in my opinion. I think the pieces that you find being performed again and again throughout the last 200, 250 years are surviving for a reason. And I think the reason of that is that it's just really great music. And I think it's, at least from a pedagogical perspective, oftentimes it will be really helpful in advancing yourself and improving your skills. And then from a programming perspective, I mean, people love the music, you know, and at the same time, I think it's really important that we do play new music, but I think one is not impacting the other per se. I think every artist needs to know for themselves what music speaks to me the most, where do I feel the most connection, what do I want to, or what music have I discovered that nobody has heard that I want to share with my audiences. So, and likewise, I find that we have a dual purpose as artists. On the one side, to know intimately and deeply understand music that is part of the canon of organ compositions, and to appreciate it, because I think it helps us understand new music better. I think we have to see music always in the context of what has been versus what is happening now, and where is music going in the future. So with regard to new music, it sometimes can be very challenging. I know for myself that it is challenging, because I find that with new music, it requires a pretty hefty investment on your end before you see the fruits of your labor. You don't know if this music is great or if it's not great. So I think it takes us a lot of time to invest first, and then to kind of have faith in living composers and say, write new music for me, and I'll give it a shot. You know, it might be really great, or I might just perform it once and then it'll go into the drawer and it'll have to wait for somebody else to discover it. So yeah, so that's my take on new music. I think it's our responsibility to invest in composers for the organ, or for any new music for that matter. And the fruit and the return could be fantastic, and it could also be a fluke, but I think we still owe that time and that investment.
Yeah. So you've done a lot of recording as an organist, you know, because you're famous and you're great. So has the recording process ruined, to some degree, the live music experience for the audience, or the expectation of live music?
I cannot say that it's ruined. There is something really exciting and exhilarating about being in a live performance and all of the stuff that comes with it. I enjoy it. I enjoy the excitement, the adrenaline that you can hear in the music. And likewise, I think there is great beauty in a polished product that one can produce if you have the chance to record something professionally and you take several days to play and to listen and to make small improvements, because oftentimes what we want to produce or what we want to create doesn't always sound the way, or it doesn't always come out on the other side the way we intend. So to have the possibility to listen into your own playing and to confirm that, yes, this is actually how I want this to sound, I think produces just another dimension of creating beautiful music. Now one can take that to all kinds of levels, of course. You can create something that is very meaningful and that is very thorough and very thought out and very polished, but you can also create something that becomes sterile. And I think it's the balance that you have to find as the artist, that you're not focused on creating perfection in a technical sense, but rather that you remember to create perfection in a musical sense.
And I think also, you know, you'll know because you've done lots of recording, that you gain an appreciation for what the producer and the technician that's actually recording you does. And I think sometimes, especially for younger organists going into that process, it's like, oh, well, I just turn up and play. And, you know, your producer might have very specific things where they're listening and their expertise is saying, oh, well, let's just do that again. You know, let's just play with this because of some of the frequencies is impeding on this, or let's do another take, or, you know, just play that bit again because maybe we can piece it together. And I think sometimes there isn't always an understanding. I don't think it's lack of appreciation. I think it's lack of understanding of what music producers do and what their role in, you know, producing an organ recording is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A musician. So what's your experience with working with producers, I suppose, the question?
Yeah, so it's a very intimate relationship, and it's a relationship of trust. I've had labels and producers who said, oh, people want to hear shorter pieces. I would say, why don't you record a CD of 3-minute pieces, like 20 of them? We'll fill a CD, and light, energetic, fast, beautiful, the end. That would be something where I would be very cautious. That means if a producer has a predetermined outcome and says, I want to create something, a product like that, that is something I think one needs to be careful about. So whenever I've recorded my CDs, it has actually in all cases, it has been a very friendly and very mutually respectful relationship with the recording engineer and the artistic consultant and the producers and the labels. And usually it's important that I have final say on what I want to record, how I want it to sound. And I have to say that in most cases, whenever I'm in the recording process and I'm in touch with the recording engineer or the artistic consultant, and they say, oh, I heard, for example, this pedal registration is really loud in that passage. Are you sure you want it that loud? And I will go down into the sound booth or whatever, or in the sacristy, if it's in the church where they're all set up, and I will listen to it. And I will be able to make a choice and say, you know what, actually, you're right. That pedal passage is louder than I wanted it to be. Or they say, well, I think it's too loud. But then I can come back and say, no, actually, I really want it to be this present. I want it to be absolutely in the forefront. So it's a collaboration in that sense. So with the recording I'm about to do in Kaohsiung here in Taiwan, I asked Tony Liu to be my artistic consultant, who is separate from the sound engineer, and his sole purpose is to be my ears in the sound booth and to listen to what I'm doing. And I've asked them specifically, you need to give me your feedback. I trust in you telling me what you hear or what you don't hear. You know my playing, you've heard me before. So don't hesitate. When you hear something that makes no sense to you, talk to me about it. Let's discuss it. I need to have your feedback. So it's a very intimate and close collaboration.
But again, it's great that you are able to share that, because that is about, it's attitude, isn't it? It's finding people that, understand your playing, understand the instrument and what's going on musically. And it's not taken as a personal attack. Oh, you played it too loudly, at all. And I think that that's something that, again, the recording process for the organ music can be really hidden. This CD comes out and then it gets reviewed and then everyone's like, well, how did that happen? And if you're honest, and particularly in the classical world, there isn't that necessarily that crossover. If you were, in a different genre where you'd kind of be more aware of the conversations going on. So I think that's really valuable.
Sensitivity and tact and fruitful collaboration is really what it comes down to, I think, and mutual respect. I mean, these people, recording engineer, artistic consultant, producer, these are all very experienced people. And I think if one is in talks with people about producing a CD, you very quickly notice, what the priorities are in each party. And I think one needs to take that information and decide if this is what one wants to do or if one needs a different team.
And I suppose as well, like you were saying, just be cautious if they're wanting lots of pieces that eat 3 minutes, 4 minutes, I suppose some of the motive behind that is radio plays. Because, radio plays, they want short pieces, fast pieces, quick pick me up, it's done. And actually that's not necessarily the best thing for you as a performer. If you were programming a recital, you wouldn't program a recital of like 10 really short, fast pieces. That would, so still thinking, well, what's the musical goal here?
Yeah, I think that programming
certain things as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I interrupted you and then the sound cut out.
Saying, understanding why they may be asking for certain things, and then what is it that you're the performer to compromise on, and what is absolutely, no, this is essential.
Yeah. So my take on that is, I think it goes into the, on a larger scale, into what it means to be an artist. I think on a very local scale, when we make music, I think we have to take many factors into consideration as we make our choices and how we play, because we want to satisfy a lot of elements in order for our music to be really good. And I think that it expands to the concept of creating good concert programs. I'm not saying that for the case of argument, I'm not saying that 3-minute pieces or even 2-minute pieces are not suitable for concerts. By all means, I think they can be extremely suitable, right? Or I don't think that every composition that's on a program needs to be meat and potatoes, 25, 30, 40-minute pieces. And it's kind of like satisfying everything, taking everything into consideration and saying, well, how can I produce something that is substantial, that is of high quality, that is also marketable, that satisfies the radios, all of that. And I think that's where the artistic process continues in terms of producing something that is true to yourself and yet satisfies a lot of the things that humans are looking for, whether they're listeners or producers or labels or other artists, and trying to bring that into balance.
No, it's really good. Okay, so this next question, maybe it's slightly different in the States or in Germany, but there's a big push at the moment about women organists. And, you know, here in the UK, we had the adjustable benches campaign, and, you know, it got lots of traction, etc. And, you know, there's some really great female organists bringing visibility to the organ, which is great for the instrument. But, you know, in 2022, considering the world as it is right now, is that the right conversation to be having? Or do we feel that maybe, you know, a women organist and that kind of almost a militant push for women organists particularly is actually a little bit out of date, and the world's kind of moved on, but maybe the organ world hasn't caught up because people are perhaps more interested in a great performance and a really good quality, and they're not actually seeing a gender at all? And is that maybe something that is the organist pushing, as opposed to the reception of just the organ generally requiring, if that makes sense? What's your take on that? I mean, that's a big question, but
it's a huge question, and I feel that you are actually more qualified to give your perspective on this than I am. I am a total proponent on giving everyone opportunities to be heard and to be seen, and especially women. Now, it depends on which part of the world we're addressing this question, because I mean, I don't have any data on this, but it feels as though predominantly men are organists in the United States, although there are some absolutely outstanding female organists who are in the concert scene and who are church musicians in the United States. And then if you look, for example, at Korea, where it's an absolutely female-dominated profession, where, I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of Dong-Ye Shin and Ji-Sang Kim as the only two male organists in Korea who are having careers. I could be wrong about this, but everybody else is female. So I think it depends on which part of the world one is looking at. And so I don't know if I'm able to answer your question, but I'm definitely a proponent of giving everyone opportunities to be heard and to be seen. And if in fact it is the case that women are granted fewer opportunities in the organ world as musicians, that should be considered and that should be prioritized, and that the profession is brought into balance, because I think it's important to have just a wide variety of individuals who are helping us, you know, achieve a greater goal.
And I think, you know, what you said about where you are in the world, sometimes, you know, you can get a disproportionate amount of something thrown at you, especially through social media, where it may seem like, oh, this is a massive issue, and actually it's a really small problem. And I think, you know, as you said, it's everyone should have the opportunities, absolutely. But I think also, I suppose my view would be, going forward, I don't feel like the organ world is particularly in a position to be able to go, we need one gender more than the other, because I'm like, there's just not enough people playing. You know, there's more organs being taken out of, especially in the West, there's lots, you know, organs are being taken out of places. We can't be so particular as to say more of this type of person playing the organ, because actually you just need more people playing the organ. Full stop.
Yeah. And I have to admit, maybe I'm living under a rock, but this is the first time that I have discussed this topic with regard to the organ being a profession, that this is relevant. I mean, I'm interested and I'm curious, but I'd be curious to know more about what the current status is, if there is indeed an imbalance, and if more opportunities need to be given to women in our field, or whether it is indeed an issue. What is your perspective? What do you feel? Is there an imbalance in place?
Well, so I was invited to join what's called SWO, which is the Society of Women Organists. You know, their sort of mission is to get more women, particularly playing the organ and in sort of cathedral roles, because, you know, you can count on your hand how many women work in cathedrals as organists or down in England. So I think we probably are behind the rest of the world by 20 years, perhaps, as far as that balance goes. But actually, you know, when you listen to lots of, I think because maybe because I'm relatively new to the organ world, there seems to be quite a lot of sensitivity from women organists, you know, where there might be an audience member or another organist who makes a comment, and then it's received as oh, well, it's because I'm a woman. And actually I'm going, well, it could be because you're really young, you know, or maybe not something they've seen before. And I think don't be necessarily too easily offended. You know, what is curiosity? You know, I played a recital last year and someone came up to me, and obviously I'm in my bright pink dress, flowers in my hair, and he was like, oh, what are you doing? Just one of the audience members, an older gentleman. And I was like, oh, I'm going to play the organ. He was like, oh, are you not a singer? You know, now I know lots of women who would be really, oh, absolutely not. Why do you think I can be you know, but for me, I'm like, if he's never seen a woman playing the organ before, it's not a sexist comment. It's just something he's not seen before, because it's about visibility, you know, of people playing the organ. He's not anti the fact that I'm female playing the organ. So I think lots of conversations where it's maybe being a little bit skewed. You know, again, you look at the adjustable benches campaign, and I know there's, you know, lots of women who are maybe 5'1", 5'2". I'm 5'7", so an organ bench height will never be an issue for me. However, lots of this I know are 5'3", so it is for them. So it just feels a little bit of, well, that's not really a woman's issue, is it? It's just a height issue. But I'm a tall woman, for me at all. So I suppose maybe is there a disproportionate amount of this narrative? You know, I think maybe again I'm in the north of England, where there's a lot less going on altogether, and my approach isn't we just need more women. It's we just need more people playing the organ. You know, every parish could have 2 organ scholars. Great. What does the gender matter? I suppose, and it feels a little bit like stepping back in time in some ways, because, you know, in all of my work in, you know, as a pianist and in recording studios, never have I come across such a militant women this and that sort of attitude, because it's about the work that you're producing and that being of great quality, and that's a full stop. So you know, I think it's really interesting what you said about career and looking at, you know, maybe taking a more global perspective on what else is going on in the world, and actually globally it's probably relatively balanced.
I don't know how to add more to this, other than to say that if somebody came to confide in me and said, I feel disadvantaged because of who I am, whether I'm, you know, a woman or transgender, I can say for sure that I would be the first person in place to make sure that people are treated equally, and that people are given equal opportunity. And everybody has likely a different experience. And, you know, it could be that in some cases there are truly, you know, bigoted people who simply have a skewed worldview. And then there are some people who are just simply ignorant due to no fault of their own, who need to be forgiven in some sense. So I think it's important to be sensitive and to be aware.
No, I think you're right as well, that it's, you know, it's take it on a case by case basis and see it for what it is. You know, I always think, what's the motive behind this person saying this? You know, because people with huge egos that are, you know, they're all out for themselves. That's just, you know, can be, yeah, you're going to come across those people if you're in the arts, and actually realizing that, well, that is just that person. That doesn't represent, you know, everybody.
Yeah.
There's always those people around, because that's, you know, that's what makes the interesting place.
And which in the end does not devalidate how we feel in that very moment. But I think it's important to, as you were saying, to see the larger picture and to ask ourselves, you know, is there a systemic issue that needs to be addressed? Or was this a one-time incident that is just unfortunate?
Oh, okay. I feel like we've covered a lot of topics there.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of things that I normally don't talk about as well. So I appreciate you opening these new thoughts and ideas to me, and I really appreciate it.
So much for, you know, giving me your time. I know you're very busy and you're prepping for these concerts and things. Do you want to give people a little bit of information about these concerts and if they can attend, etc., get tickets?
Absolutely, yeah. So I don't know when you're planning to air this interview, but it's currently in early October, and I'm in hotel quarantine here in Taipei in Taiwan, and I'm getting ready to perform with the Kaohsiung Symphony Orchestra on October 8th. We're doing a Handel organ concerto and the Jongen Symphony Concertant, and then October 9, I'm doing a solo recital, which consists of Bach G minor Fantasy and Fugue, Reger Fantasy and Fugue on BACH, and the Liszt Ad Nos Fantasy. And then I'm participating on October 10th in what is called National Day here in Taiwan. And it's basically an open house event at the Wei Wu Ying, the Kaohsiung National Center for the Performing Arts, where they've got a ginormous Kleist organ. So I'm doing 2 open house recitals, which is going to be a lot of fun. And then we're going to do a CD recording here in Kaohsiung. And then I'm back to the United States, and the season continues. And if you happen to be in Taiwan, if you happen to be in Kaohsiung, you're more than welcome to attend. It would be great to have you there. And other than that, I just want to defer you to my website, to Instagram, to TikTok, to Facebook, wherever. I'm always happy to be in touch with people. Send me messages. I try to respond to everything that comes in. And I'm just so glad to share the work that I love so much. And this music and this art, it's a small world. So we got to help each other out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and enjoy your concerts and recording. And hopefully you stay in good health as well throughout your time. It can be, you know, jet lag and all of that sort of thing, and we're still getting over COVID, really, aren't we? So yes, thank you so much, and I hope we can chat again in the future. That would be quite fun.
Absolutely, hit me up. Thanks so much, Rebecca, and all the best to you.
Bye.
Bye.